In 1968, he was rocking and rolling. He was running all over the world. He had an incredible quartet that I always said, they could set up in a phone booth and sound like their records. That's how good, Larry Gales and Ben Riley and Charlie Rouse were. In 1968, in terms of the nation, Turmoil was the name of the game from coast to coast. For Thelonious to perform in Palo Alto at that time, which was a very segregated town, was pretty incredible. I was made aware of this by a phone call from Danny Scher. And I had no idea who Danny Scher was, but he called and he said, my name is Danny Scher, and I promoted a concert of your father's in 1968, and I was going through my attic and I found the tape. I haven't seen the tape in 30 or 40 years. I knew it was a great concert, so I'm calling you up to see perhaps we can do something together to release the recording. And, from my perspective, it was like, okay, here's another guy with the tape. But then he told me, he said, oh, and by the way, I promoted this concert when I was 15 years old. And that clearly caught my attention.
I grew up in Palo Alto, California. And at Berkeley, at that time, there was a lady there named Darlene Chan. She founded the Berkeley Jazz Festival. I remember calling her and asked her if I could help on her concerts. I was like, at this time I'm like 14 or 15. She said I should come to the Monterey Jazz Festival, and I remember going to Monterey. Now you have to understand, Palo Alto at that time was a very white community. We didn't really think of it. I had never really thought of it that way, but it was. So I went to the Monterey Jazz Festival, but what happened internally to me, it was truly the first truly interracial experience I ever had in my life. So I got this idea that I wanted to put on my own concert at Palo Alto High School, which we call Pally. I don't think anyone really took me seriously except for me. I called Darlene. I said, I'd really love to do, my two idols really are Thelonious Monk and Duke Ellington. How do I get to Thelonious Monk? She said, call his manager. I called the manager. We worked out an agreement for him to play at Pally at my school on October 27th. That's how the show got booked. And then it's not selling very well. It really wasn't selling well at all.
And Palo Alto was really divided in those days. And you really had the African-American side of town and white side of town. No one believed him because he was a 15-year-old kid. He was a 15-year-old white kid coming in the black community talking about, I'm bringing this, monumental African-American artist to the other side of town.
I go to East Palo Alto and I start putting up posters. And the police come after me and they say, hey kid, you better get out of here. I said, why? They said, this is too dangerous for you. You have to get out of here. You're gonna get hurt. I said, no, I'll get more hurt if the show loses money. So I'm putting up the posters. I'm saying, yeah, Monk's coming to Palo Alto. Yeah, Monk's coming to, yeah, sure, we'll believe it when we see it. I said, then don't buy a ticket, come, and when you see Monk, you'll see it, and then buy a ticket. And the word kind of spread in East Palo Alto that Monk was coming to Palo Alto. So a couple days before the concert, I decide I better call Monk and just see what's going on and see what time he wants to get there. Called him at the club and he picked up the phone. I said, Mr. Monk, you're playing at my high school this Sunday. He said, what are you talking about? I said, well, I have an agreement and we had a contract. He never sent it back, but he sent me pictures of you and your record, and we were advertising it, and we have a program. He said, well, how am I gonna get there? I have a gig that night. I said, I know, and he knew you have a gig that night. That's why the show is scheduled for 2 in the afternoon, so you can make it back to San Francisco. And he said, well, how am I gonna get there? I said, well, my brother's old enough to drive, so he can come get you. And he said, okay. I called my brother, who turned me on to jazz. I said, okay, now you get to be Monk's driver.
And the day of the concert, I think Danny said there was quite a crowd of African Americans and others in the schoolyard. And Danny says the car pulled up.
Monk shows up. I remember the bass is sticking out of the window, and people see the band. They all come up, they buy their tickets. The show does really well.
And the rest was history. They went inside. It was a packed house. The concert was great, as evidenced by the recording. Thelonious went on to become a legend for the ages. And Danny Scher went on to become integral in the promoting of rock and roll and jazz on the highest level for many years after that. It's really an American story. It's really a story of the triumph of people with good intentions. Thelonious always had good intentions. I can imagine that Thelonious liked the idea that this kid was, like so bold and doing his own thing, which was paramount to Thelonious Monk. Do your own thing, man. He used to tell me that. He used to tell everybody, every musician he ever interacted with, do your own thing. It all made sense to me at the end of the day. Like I said, it sounded like something my father would do because it was outside the box.